Welcome to Heart Over Gold, the channel where love, kindness, and humanity shine brighter than any fortune. In today's story, Rachel Mendoza's life is shattered when she discovers her husband, Victor, has been having an affair with Michelle Stone, a woman the same age Rachel was when she married him. As Victor plans to present Michelle as his new partner at an exclusive gala, Rachel decides to make a dramatic entrance, showing the world that she is no longer the neglected wife. With the support of her friend, Clive Harris, Rachel reclaims her power and begins a new chapter of self-discovery, love, and strength. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments and keep up with our latest stories. Some women uncover infidelity through unexpected texts or the scent of unfamiliar perfume. For Rachel, it came in the form of a restaurant receipt tucked into her husband's suit pocket. A receipt for two, dated the day he claimed to be working late. But what truly shattered her wasn't just discovering that Victor had a mistress. It was realizing that she was the same age as their daughter when the affair started, 5 years old. And in just 3 days, Victor planned to introduce this woman as his date at the most significant event of the year, while Rachel was expected to stay home, pretending to know nothing. He didn't know it yet, but Rachel had already decided that she too would attend the event, and when she entered that ballroom, nothing would ever be the same. The golden rays of the Madrid sun streamed through the silk curtains in the Mendoza mansion, casting a warm glow that danced across the Italian marble floors of the grand entrance hall. At 32, Rachel's beauty still turned heads on the streets. Her chestnut hair fell in soft waves, her green eyes sparkled with a hypnotic intensity, and her smile, even when forced, had the power to brighten any room. She was arranging fresh flowers in a crystal vase, a quiet routine that helped her find peace amidst the chaos of her life. "Mom, can I help?" Sophie's sweet voice rang out from the hallway, and Rachel felt her heart lift. Her 5-year-old daughter was her greatest joy, a miniature version of herself, with the same green eyes and gentle nature that radiated from within. "Of course, my princess," Rachel smiled, crouching down to her daughter's level. "How about you help me choose the best flowers for this spot?" Sophie eagerly nodded, her blonde curls bouncing as she carefully examined each bloom. In these moments, Rachel found the strength to keep up the facade of a perfect marriage, a facade that had long become a gilded cage. The sound of hurried footsteps echoed from the marble staircase, signaling Victor's arrival. At 38, he was a striking figure, tall with broad shoulders that filled his designer suits perfectly, black hair meticulously styled, and a confident smile that had won not only Rachel's heart years ago, but also the admiration of Madrid's business elite. Victor Mendoza, the CEO of Mendoza and Associates, one of Europe's largest consulting firms, had achieved an almost mythical rise in the corporate world. From humble beginnings, he had become one of Spain's most influential men. But with his success came a change Rachel could no longer ignore. The attentive, kind man she had fallen in love with was replaced by someone distant, calculating, and increasingly disrespectful. "Morning," Victor muttered, barely glancing at his wife and daughter as he checked his phone. His messages clearly captivated his attention more than his family. "Daddy," Sophie exclaimed, running toward him, arms wide for a hug. Victor returned the embrace absent-mindedly, his gaze still fixed on the phone screen. "Hello? Sweetie," he said, his tone laced with impatience. "Daddy's busy right now." Rachel watched, her heart sinking as Sophie's bright smile faded just a little. It had always been like this. Victor treated his family as a mere obligation, something to endure between business calls and meetings. "Victor," Rachel spoke softly, but with resolve. "Today's Saturday. I thought maybe we could spend the day together. Take Sophie to the park?" "Impossible," he interrupted without even looking up. "I need to review the merger presentation for the Argentine hotel group. If we land this, we'll be expanding across Latin America." He finally looked up, but his eyes were cold, distant, almost condescending. "Some things are more important than park walks, Rachel. I hope you understand." Her smile was strained, but she kept her composure. "Of course, Sophie and I will find something else to do." Victor nodded, already engrossed in his phone again. Rachel noticed his fingers moving quickly across the keyboard, and the subtle, content smile that curled on his lips as he typed. A wave of suspicion surged through her, one she had been pushing away for months. The phone rang, and Victor answered immediately, his voice taking on that familiar, charming tone he reserved for important people. "Michelle, my dear," he said, strolling toward his office. "Of course, we can move up our meeting, Michelle." That name had become increasingly familiar over the past few months, always spoken of as a talented executive or consultant. But the intimacy in Victor's voice when he said her name sent a chill through Rachel. Her gut twisted with an overwhelming certainty. "Mom, is Daddy going to play with us?" Sophie asked, her hopeful voice pulling Rachel back to the present. She crouched down to her daughter again, taking her small hands in hers. "Not today, darling," Rachel said, kissing Sophie's head. "But we're going to have a special day, just the two of us. How about the Prow Museum, and then ice cream at that shop you love?" Sophie's eyes lit up, and Rachel's heart swelled with gratitude for her resilient, joyful little girl. As they headed out, Rachel overheard snippets of Victor's conversation. "Reservation for two, can't wait." Each word felt like a knife in her heart. Later, as they strolled through Madrid's sunlit streets, Sophie chattered away about her favorite paintings at the museum. Rachel couldn't help but reflect on the life she once had. There was a time when she and Victor were inseparable, when he surprised her with small romantic gestures, when his admiration for her was so clear in his eyes. When did everything change? When did the man who once promised she was his #1 start treating her like an accessory? Something beautiful to show off at events but disregarded at home. "Mom, are you sad?" Sophie's innocent question broke through Rachel's thoughts. "No, sweetheart," Rachel replied, her voice catching. "Mom just feels really lucky to have such a special daughter like you." It was true in part. Sophie was her reason to keep going, even when Rachel felt invisible in her own home. But beneath the surface, a storm of emotions brewed. Pain, anger, confusion, and a growing realization that her marriage had become a lie, a sham. That evening, after putting Sophie to bed, Rachel sat alone in the living room, aimlessly flipping through a magazine. Victor hadn't returned from his meeting yet, and she couldn't shake the thought of Michelle. The door opened, and Victor stepped inside, looking pleased with himself. His smile faltered when he saw Rachel waiting. "Still awake?" he asked, loosening his tie. "How was your meeting?" "Productive?" Rachel asked, keeping her voice neutral. "The Argentine group is very interested. It could be our entry into South America," he replied vaguely, pouring himself a drink. Rachel nodded but asked, "And Michelle? Did she attend the meeting?" Victor's expression shifted for a fraction of a second, his face betraying irritation or guilt before the mask of indifference returned. "She coordinated the market analysis," he said, his voice tight. "Why do you ask?" "Curiosity," Rachel lied. "You talk about her a lot lately." Victor's look softened, the kind of condescending expression Rachel knew all too well. "Rachel, you don't understand the business world. Michelle is a competent professional, nothing more." He finished his drink in one gulp. "I'm tired. Good night." And with that he left the room, leaving Rachel alone with her suspicions, and a heart that was beginning to break beyond repair. That night, as she lay next to Victor, who was already asleep, Rachel wondered when she had become a stranger in her own life. When had she stopped fighting for her marriage and started merely surviving it? Meanwhile, outside the luxurious walls of their home, Madrid pulsed with life. But within those walls, Rachel felt more alone than ever, unaware that everything was about to change. The strong, determined woman she once was about to resurface from the ashes of her broken marriage. Rachel showed him the restaurant bill. "I found this today." Clive looked at the paper and closed his eyes as if he were feeling physical pain. When he opened them again, there was a sad determination in them. "Her name is Michelle Stone," he said, each word coming out with difficulty. "She's 27, a marketing consultant. She's been working with us for about 6 months. Rachel felt as if she'd been punched in the stomach. Hearing the confirmation of her worst suspicions was even more painful than she had imagined. "How long has it been?" she asked, her voice almost inaudible. "I'd say it started 5 months ago, maybe a little more." Clive sighed deeply. "Rachel, I tried to talk to Victor several times. I tried to make him see the madness of what he was doing, what he was risking, his family, his reputation, everything." "Oh, and what did he say?" "That I was old-fashioned, that I didn't understand the complexities of modern life." The bitterness in Clive's voice was palpable. "He said that you were content to be just a trophy wife, that Michelle challenged him intellectually." The words cut deep, more painful for coming through Clive, who she knew wastering to soften the blow. "Trophy wife," she repeated, tasting the words on her tongue as if they were poison. "He's wrong, Rachel," Clive said vehemently. "Completely wrong. You're one of the most intelligent and talented women I know. The fact that you chose to dedicate yourself to your family doesn't diminish your value at all." Rachel got up and walked to the window, looking out at the perfectly manicured garden that she herself had planned and supervised. Everything in her life seemed perfectly arranged on the outside, but inside, it was falling apart. 5 months, she murmured. 27 years is exactly the age Sophie was when Victor and I got married. The cruel irony of the situation did not go unnoticed. While she was building a life, creating a home, being the perfect wife he seemed to want, Victor was building a parallel lie, a secret life that completely excluded everything they'd promised each other. Rachel Clive approached her, his voice gentle but firm. "You need to know one more thing." She turned around, seeing something in his eyes that made her fear what was coming next. "There's a gala event next week. The annual party of the Madrid Business Association at the Villa Magna Hotel. Victor is going to be there," and he hesitated, clearly struggling with the words. "Michelle will also be there as his official date." Rachel's world seemed to stop completely. She leaned against the windowsill, feeling her legs give way. "Official date?" she repeated, her voice coming out as a strangled whisper. "He told the specialized press that she is his new strategic partner, that she will be officially presented to the Madrid Business Society at this event." Clive clenched his fists, his own anger showing through. "Rachel, forgive me for having to be the one to tell you this, but you deserve to know." "And me?" she asked, still processing the magnitude of the betrayal. "What excuse did he give for my absence?" "He said you were taking care of personal family matters." Clive's words cut like knives. "That you prefer to keep your private life away from the business spotlight." Rachel closed her eyes, feeling a toxic mixture of humiliation, anger, and a pain so deep it seemed physical. Victor wasn't just having an affair. He was actively replacing her, erasing her existence from his public life. "For how much longer, Clive?" she asked, opening her eyes and meeting his. "For how much longer do you think he intends to keep up this charade?" "Honestly, I think he's planning to ask for a divorce after the deal with the Argentinians is finalized." Clive sighed. "Michelle, she's not just a mistress, Rachel. She's ambitious, calculating. I think she sees Victor as a stepping stone to build her own empire." The revelation was like the final blow. Rachel sat heavily in the armchair, processing not only the end of her marriage, but the cruel and public way it was being executed. "He's going to leave me with nothing," she murmured more to herself than to Clive. "He's going to paint me as the inadequate wife, the woman who didn't know how to accompany his professional growth." "Not if he doesn't have a choice," Clive said, a new determination emerging in his voice. "Rachel, you're not the same vulnerable woman who married Victor 7 years ago. You've grown, evolved, you've become an excellent but powerful force. It's time to show it." She looked at him confused. "What do you mean?" "You're going to the gala event." "Clive, I can't." "You can and you will," he interrupted gently but firmly. "Not as the humiliated wife hiding at home, but as the strong and elegant woman you are. Let Victor and his mistress know that you're not going to disappear silently." "And how do you suggest I do that?" Rachel's voice carried a tone of desperation. "I don't even have an invitation." Clive smiled for the first time since he arrived. "You're going as my date. I'm a partner in the company. I have the right to bring whoever I want." And he paused meaningfully. "I have some information about Victor's questionable business practices that might be enlightening." "Clive, I can't ask you to." "You're not asking. I'm offering." He got up and walked over to her. "Rachel, Victor isn't just betraying you. He's also betraying the ethical principles of our company. There are irregular contracts, undeclared commissions, a series of activities that could destroy our reputation if they came to light." "Are you talking about blackmail?" "I'm talking about justice," Clive corrected, "and about protecting you and Sophie from what's to come." That night, after Clive left, Rachel found herself in Sophie's room, watching her daughter sleep peacefully. The innocence on the girl's face contrasted brutally with the storm of emotions lashing her mother's heart. "Mom is going to fight for us, my princess," she whispered, gently, kissing her daughter's forehead. "I'm not going to let him treat us as if we're disposable." When Victor arrived home that night, later than ever, with Michelle's perfume still on his skin, he found Rachel waiting for him in the living room. But there was something different about her, something he couldn't immediately identify. "Still awake?" he asked as always. "Victor," she said, her voice surprisingly calm and controlled. "We need to talk." He looked at her with suspicion, noticing the change in her posture, the way she held her shoulders straight, her chin up. "About what?" "About the gala event next week." Rachel got up gracefully, walking towards him. "I heard you'll have a special date." Victor's face paled slightly, but he quickly recomposed himself. "Rachel, I can explain." "You don't need to," she interrupted, her voice maintaining that disconcerting calm. "In fact, I think it will be Avery-revealing night for everyone involved." "What do you mean by that?" Rachel smiled. Not the forced and submissive smile he knew, but something new. Something that carried a dangerous promise. "You'll find out at the right time, Victor. Good night." And with that, she went upstairs, leaving him alone with his guilt and a growing sense that he had gravely underestimated the woman he had married. The days leading up to the gala event were a whirlwind of preparation and transformation for Rachel. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to spend money on herself, not just on the quick and practical purchases she had become accustomed to, but on a true investment in her own image and confidence. On Monday morning, while Victor was rushing out for another of his important meetings, Rachel called Isabel Morgan, an old college friend who had become one of Madrid's most sought-after stylists. Rachel Mendoza. Isabel's voice resonated through the line, full of surprise and genuine joy. It's been so long. I heard you married that famous CEO. How's the high society life? Complicated, Rachel replied honestly. Isabel, I need your help. I need a dress for the Business Association Gala event, and I need to look unforgettable. There was a pause on the other side of the line, and Rachel could almost hear the mechanisms of Isabel's creative mind working. What kind of unforgettable are we talking about here, dear? The kind that stops traffic or the kind that destroys relationships? The second one, Rachel said without hesitation. Perfect. Isabel smiled with satisfaction. I'll be at your house in an hour with some options that will make you feel like the goddess you always were. When Isabel arrived, accompanied by 3 assistants carrying huge bags of clothes and accessories, Rachel felt as if she was about to undergo a complete metamorphosis. My dear, Isabel said, studying Rachel with professional eyes. You're thinner, and there's a tension in your shoulders that wasn't there in college. But your eyes have a fire I've never seen before. That's good. Very good. The next 3 hours were a transformative experience. Isabel had brought 5 dresses, each more dazzling than the last. There was a blood-red one that hugged every curve provocatively, a navy blue one with crystal details that exuded royal elegance, and a black one with a structured neckline that was simultaneously sophisticated and devastating. But it was the 5th dress that made Rachel stop breathing. It was a deep emerald green, the same color as her eyes, with a cut that perfectly combined modernity and classicism. The fabric flowed like water over her body, accentuating her silhouette without being vulgar. And the neckline in the back was a work of art of seductive subtlety. This one, she said simply, looking at herself in the mirror and no longer seeing the neglected wife she had become, but the powerful woman who had always been underneath the layers of submission and self-denial. I knew you'd choose this one. Isabel smiled with satisfaction. It's the hardest to wear. It requires absolute confidence, but on you, it's going to be devastating. They spent the rest of the afternoon choosing shoes, jewelry, and discussing hair and makeup options. Isabel insisted on scheduling Rachel with her own beauty team, people who worked with international celebrities and models. Rachel, Isabel said while they were organizing everything. Can I ask what's really going on? You seem like a woman on a mission. Rachel considered for a moment whether she should share the sordid details of her situation. But something in Isabel's compassionate expression made her decide on honesty. My husband has been having an affair for 5 months. He's going to take the mistress to the gala event as his official business partner, while I'm supposed to stay home like an obedient wife, pretending I don't know anything. Isabel's eyes narrowed dangerously. What kind of man does that to a woman like you? The kind who forgot he married a woman, not a decorative accessory. Rachel's voice carried a cold determination. But he's going to remember in a very public and very memorable way. Good. Isabel smiled with a malice that reminded Rachel why they had been close friends in college. In that case, we're going to make sure you're absolutely unforgettable. Meanwhile, in the Mendoza and Associates office, Victor was having his own series of tense conversations. Clive had requested a private meeting, and Victor could feel his partner's disapproval emanating from him like heat waves. Victor, we need to talk about Michelle, Clive said directly, closing the office door. Clive, we've already discussed this. She's a competent professional, and she's charging unauthorized commissions from the South American clients. Clive interrupted him. I found discrepancies in the contracts she drafted, commissions that go directly to a personal account of hers. Victor felt the blood run cold. What are you talking about? Clive threw a thick folder on the table. 3 different contracts, all with clauses she inserted without our authorization. We're talking about more than $200,000 in irregular commissions. This must be some misunderstanding. Victor, Clive said, his voice full of pity and frustration. You're being used. Michelle isn't interested in you. She's interested in your position, your access to clients, your signature on contracts. You're overreacting because you never liked her. I'm trying to save our company and your reputation, Clive retorted. And by the way, maybe save your marriage, too. Victor stood up abruptly, walking to the window that overlooked the Madrid financial center. The city stretched out before him, a symbol of everything he had conquered, everything he had built. The idea that he could lose everything for a woman who maybe didn't even truly love him was unbearable. What do you want me to do? He finally asked, his voice defeated. Break up with her publicly. At the gala event, make it clear that there was a misunderstanding about her status in the company. Go home to your wife and try to build what can still be saved. And if I don't do that, Clive sighed deeply, then I'll be forced to present this evidence to the association's board of directors. Victor, our business reputation is at stake. I can't allow this to continue. That night, Victor arrived home earlier than usual, finding Rachel in the living room reading a book. There was something different about her, a serenity he hadn't seen in years, as if she had made some important decision. Rachel, he began, sitting next to her on the sofa. Can we talk? She marked the page of the book and looked at him, her green eyes, calm but alert. Sure. About the gala event, he hesitated, looking for the right words. Maybe you should go with me after all, as my wife. Rachel studied him for a long moment, and Victor felt uncomfortable under her penetrating gaze. Victor, is there something you'd like to tell me? What are you talking about? About Michelle? About what's really going on between you? Victor felt his heart race. How did she know? What did she know? Rachel, you don't need to explain now, she said, getting up gracefully. As you said, some revelations are best made at the right time. I'll see you at the gala event, Victor. It's going to be a very interesting night, and for the second time that week, she left him alone with his lies and a growing sense that he had completely lost control of the situation. On the day of the event, Rachel woke up with a supernatural calm. She had slept deeply for the first time in months and felt like a warrior, preparing for the most important battle of her life. Sophie spent the day at her maternal grandmother's house, protected from what was about to happen. Rachel had explained to the girl that Mom had Avery important party to go to, and that they would have a special day together over the weekend to make up for it. At 3:00 in the afternoon, Isabel's team arrived to begin the final transformation. For the next 4 hours, Rachel was molded, polished, and transformed not only into a more glamorous version of herself, but into the powerful woman who had been sleeping inside her for years. Her hair was styled in 1940s Hollywood waves, sophisticated and timeless. Her makeup enhanced her green eyes in a dramatic but elegant way, with a red lipstick that promised to leave its mark on everything it touched. The emerald dress fit her body like a second skin, and the high heels made her feel like an Amazon ready for war. When she looked at herself in the mirror for the last time before leaving, Rachel no longer saw the neglected and submissive wife she had become, but the strong and determined woman she had always been, and who was about to reclaim her place in the world. The Villa Magna Hotel was resplendent that October night. The golden lights of the neoclassical facade created a majestic glow that was reflected in the luxury cars arriving in a constant succession. The annual event of the Madrid Business Association was always the most prestigious on the city's social and business calendar, bringing together the business elite, influential politicians, and media personalities. Victor arrived at 8 minutes in the evening, impeccably dressed in a tailored Armani tuxedo with Michelle on his arm. She wore a golden dress that shone under the lights, her blonde hair perfectly styled in a sophisticated bun. At 27, Michelle Stone possessed a calculated beauty. Every gesture, every smile, every movement seemed carefully planned to cause maximum impact. "You're nervous," she observed as they walked down the red carpet, greeting photographers and specialized journalists. "Just focused," Victor replied, but his hand tightening on her arm betrayed his tension. "Remember, you're my new strategic partner, responsible for international expansion. Nothing more, nothing less." Michelle smiled, but there was something sharp in her eyes. "Of course, dear. Whatever you want." The hotel's grand ballroom was decorated with refined elegance. White and gold flowers in monumental arrangements, crystal chandeliers that created a dazzling play of lights, and tables strategically arranged to favor circulation and business conversations. Victor and Michelle were immediately surrounded by other business people, journalists, and important personalities. Victor presented Michelle with the rehearsed speech about her professional competence and strategic vision, but he couldn't help but notice the speculative glances they exchanged with each other. Madrid's high society was small, and everyone knew that Victor was married. Victor Edward Sinclair, the association's president, approached with a political smile. "What a pleasure to see you here. And this must be the famous Michelle we've heard so much about." "Edward, always a pleasure." Victor extended his hand. "Yes," said Bortas. "Michelle Stone, our new director of international expansion." "Fascinating," Edward said, but his eyes carried a curiosity that went beyond the professional. "And your wife, Victor? It's been a while since we've seen her at public events." Victor felt a knot form in his stomach. "Rachel prefers to take care of family matters. You know how she is, of course." Edward nodded, but there was a strangeness in his tone that made Victor feel uncomfortable. On the other side of the room, near the main entrance, Clive Harris checked his watch for the 10th time in 5 minutes. It was 8:40 and Rachel still hadn't arrived. He was beginning to wonder if she had changed her mind, if the courage she had shown during the week had finally abandoned her. It was then that the conversations in the room began to gradually die down, like ripples spreading across a lake. Heads turned towards the entrance. Whispers began to circulate, and even the orchestra seemed to play more softly, as if instinctively recognizing that something extraordinary was about to happen. Rachel Mendoza had arrived. She appeared at the top of the marble staircase that descended to the main hall, and for a moment that seemed eternal. Time simply stopped. The emerald dress flowed around her body like liquid water, catching and reflecting the lights of the chandeliers in an almost magical way. Her posture was that of a queen, shoulders straight, chin up, and those green eyes that had always been her trademark now shone with an intensity that seemed to illuminate the entire room. She descended the steps slowly, each movement calculated for maximum impact. There was no rush, no anxiety, just an absolute confidence that radiated from her like a palpable aura. The silence in the room was almost deafening. 200 people, CEOs, politicians, socialites, journalists, all stopped what they were doing to watch this dazzling woman who had appeared like a vision. "My God," someone whispered near the entrance. "Who is she?" "It's Victor Mendoza's wife," came the whispered reply. "Rachel Mendoza. It's been years since we saw her in public." Victor, who was in the center of the room talking to a group of investors, felt a shiver run down his spine before turning around. There was something about the quality of the silence, the way conversations had ceased, that made his survival instinct set off all the alarms. When he finally turned around and saw her, his face visibly paled. This was not the submissive and neglected Rachel he had left at home for months. This was a completely transformed woman, a force of nature in human form, and she was walking directly towards him. Michelle followed Victor's gaze and felt her own stomach clench. She had seen photos of Rachel, old photos from social events, some casual images Victor had on his phone, but nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared her for the magnetic presence of the woman who now completely dominated everyone's attention in the room. "Victor," Michelle whispered, her voice full of an insecurity she rarely showed. "It's her, isn't it?" Victor couldn't answer. He was completely hypnotized by the vision of his wife, a wife he had neglected, underestimated, and betrayed. Walking towards him with the confidence of a warrior goddess, Rachel reached where they were standing, and the circle of business people surrounding them automatically opened to let her pass, as if instinctively recognizing that they were in the presence of someone extraordinary. "Victor," she said, her voice soft, but loaded with an authority that made everyone present fall completely silent. "What a surprise to find you here." She then turned to Michelle, studying her with a look that was simultaneously evaluative and completely impassive. "And you must be Michelle Stone. I've heard a lot about you." Michelle tried to smile, tried to find that calculated confidence that had always served her well. But something in Rachel's gaze made her feel like a child being evaluated by an adult. Yes, I'm Michelle," she managed to say. "I work with Victor on international expansion." "How interesting," Rachel said, her tone remaining perfectly cordial. "International expansion?" Victor always had so much passion for new territories. The insinuation did not go unnoticed by anyone in the circle watching them. Several business people exchanged meaningful glances, and more than one journalist discreetly activated their cell phone recorder. "Rachel." Victor finally found his voice, although it came out more than he intended. "What are you doing here?" She smiled then. Not the submissive and conciliatory smile he knew, but something new, something that carried a dangerous promise. "I'm here as Clive's date, naturally. You don't mind, I hope. After all, I'm also part of the Mendoza family." It was then that Clive appeared at her side, offering her his arm in a chivalrous way. He was elegantly dressed, but it was the protective way he positioned himself next to Rachel that made Victor feel a pang of something that could have been jealousy. "Good evening, Victor," Clive said, his voice maintaining professional cordiality, but his eyes carrying a coldness that Victor had never seen before. "Michelle, Clive," Victor replied, his mind working furiously to understand the dynamic of the situation. "I didn't know you and Rachel." "We're old friends," Rachel replied before Clive could speak. "It's comforting to have true friends, don't you think? People you can completely trust." The word trust fell like a bomb in the middle of the conversation. Victor felt the blood drain from his face, and Michelle instinctively took a step closer to him, as if seeking protection. Well, Edward Sinclair appeared again, clearly sensing the tension in the air, but determined to maintain the cordiality of the event. "How wonderful to have the whole Mendoza family here tonight. Rachel, you look absolutely stunning. It's been so long." "Thank you, Edward." Rachel smiled warmly at him. "It's good to be back." "Back?" Victor repeated involuntarily. At social events, darling, Rachel said, looking directly into his eyes. I realized I was missing a lot of things by staying home. So many interesting conversations, so many revelations. The orchestra began to play a classic waltz, and the room gradually resumed its activities, although many eyes were still discreetly focused on the drama unfolding in the center of the dance floor. Rachel Clive extended his hand to her. Would you like to dance? I'd love to, she replied, accepting his hand without even looking at Victor. As they headed to the dance floor, Victor stood, watching his wife, a wife he suddenly realized he may never have truly known, dance gracefully in his partner's arms. Her every movement was elegant, confident, magnetically attractive. It was impossible not to watch her, impossible not to be drawn to her transformed presence. Victor, Michelle whispered beside him, her voice full of insecurity. Maybe we should go. But Victor couldn't move. He was completely fascinated by the woman on the dance floor. A woman he had taken for granted for years. A woman who was now clearly showing him and everyone present exactly what he had lost. And the night was just beginning. The waltz came to an end, but Rachel and Clive remained on the dance floor for a few more bars, talking in whispers that seemed intimate and conspiratorial. Victor watched every gesture, every smile, every moment of closeness between them with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Are you okay? Clive asked softly, his hand still gently positioned on her waist. Better than I've been in years, Rachel replied. And for the first time in months, she truly meant it. Thank you for giving me the courage, Toby here. The courage was always there, Rachel. You just let it sleep for a while. When they returned to the social area, they found Victor alone. Michelle had disappeared, probably to the bathroom, trying to recompose herself and plan her next move. Victor. Rachel approached him with that same disconcerting calm. Can we talk in private? Victor nodded, unable to refuse. There was something about her presence that completely magnetized him. They headed to one of the hotel's side terraces, a more reserved space overlooking the illuminated gardens of Madrid. Once alone, the veneer of social cordiality finally began to crack. What are you doing, Rachel? Victor asked, his voice full of frustration and confusion. I'm being myself, she replied simply. Something I forgot how to do in recent years. You know what I mean? There's this transformation appearing here with Clive. Publicly embarrassing me. Embarrassing you? Rachel interrupted, her green eyes shining dangerously. Victor, you brought your mistress to a public event and introduced her as your partner. Who was embarrassing whom? Victor palled. How did you? Oh, how I know. Rachel took a step closer, and Victor could smell her perfume. Not the soft, familiar perfume she had always worn, but something new. More intense. More confident. I know about the casino's terrace. I know about the 5 months of lies. I know about the plans to publicly discard me while you elevate Michelle to the status of your new companion. Rachel, I can explain. You don't need to, she said, surprisingly calm. In fact, I should thank you. Thank me. Victor was completely lost. Yes, you did me a huge favor by showing me who you really are. Imagine if I had discovered this 10 years from now, after wasting even more of my life trying to be the perfect wife for a man who didn't deserve a single day of my dedication. The words cut Victor more deeply than he ever imagined words could cut, because somewhere deep down, he knew she was right. What about Sophie? He asked, trying to regain some control of the situation. Sophie is going to be fine, Rachel replied. She has a mother who loves her unconditionally and who is going to fight for her. As for the father, she paused meaningfully. Well, that's going to depend on your decisions from now on. What do you mean? I mean, you have 2 options, Victor. You can do this civilly. Divide our assets fairly. Establish a custody agreement that prioritizes Sophie's well-being and maintain a minimum of dignity in the process. Or Rachel smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Or Clive can decide to share some interesting information with the association's board of directors about certain financial irregularities that involve South American contracts. Victor felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. You wouldn't do that? I wouldn't. Rachel's eyes narrowed. Victor, you spent the last 5 months lying to me, betraying me, humiliating me, and planning to discard me as if I were old furniture. What exactly makes you think you still deserve my protection? At that moment, Michelle appeared at the entrance of the terrace, clearly having looked for Victor. She had touched up her makeup and recomposed her posture, but there was still a visible tension in her shoulders. Victor, darling, she said, trying to sound casual, people are asking for you. There are some investors who would like to, Michelle. Rachel turned to her with a smile that was pure elegance and pure poison. How nice that you're here. I was just talking to Victor about decisions and consequences. Michelle looked nervously between Victor and Rachel, clearly sensing the tension in the air, but not fully understanding its origin. You know, Rachel continued, walking slowly around Michelle like a predator, studying its prey. I heard you're very talented at expanding territories. Clive told me some fascinating things about your creativity with international contracts. Michelle's face lost color instantly. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm sure you don't, Rachel said softly. But I'm sure the Spanish tax audit department would be very interested in learning more about those creative commissions that appeared in private accounts. Victor. Michelle turned to him, panic starting to appear in her voice. What is she talking about? Victor looked between the two women. His wife transformed into an unstoppable force, and his mistress, suddenly looking very young and very vulnerable. For the first time in months, he began to see the situation clearly. Michelle was not the sophisticated and independent woman he had thought. She was an opportunist who had seen an opportunity for social and financial ascension in him. And Rachel was everything he had forgotten she could be. Intelligent, strong, magnificent Michelle, he finally said, his voice tired. I think you should leave. What? She looked at him as if he had lost his mind. Victor, you can't be serious. After everything after what? Rachel interrupted softly. After you used my family to advance your career. After you stole from the company my husband built. After you tried to destroy a marriage for your own benefit. I love Victor. Michelle exploded, finally showing real emotion. No, Rachel said with unshakable certainty. You love what Victor represents. Power, money, status. But as for Victor, the man, I doubt you even know him. Michelle looked at Victor, hoping he would defend her, that he would deny the accusations. But he remained silent, and in that silence she saw the truth. You're going to regret this, she finally said, her mask of sophistication falling completely at last. You're both going to regret it. Maybe, Rachel said calmly, but at least we'll regret it with dignity. Michelle left the terrace with quick and furious steps, leaving Victor and Rachel alone again. The silence stretched between them, laden with 7 years of marriage, months of betrayal, and the inevitable reality of what was to come. So now what? Victor finally asked. Now you choose, Rachel replied. Dignity or destruction? Cooperation or war? Respect or public humiliation? Victor looked at the woman in front of him, his wife, the mother of his daughter, the woman he had sworn to love and protect, and saw not only what he had lost, but what he had never truly appreciated. Rachel, he said, his voice breaking slightly. I don't, she interrupted gently. Not now, Victor. Some words lose their power when they are said too late. You made your choice 5 months ago. Now I'm making mine. She turned to leave, but stopped at the entrance to the terrace. Oh, and Victor, the next time you choose a woman, make sure she loves you for the man you are, not for what you possess. You deserve it, and so does she. And with those words, Rachel Mendoza left the terrace and Victor's life forever, leaving him alone with his decisions and their consequences. 6 months later, the Parisian spring sun filtered through the windows of the elegant Malmarder apartment, creating golden patterns on the polished wooden floor. Rachel was in the kitchen preparing breakfast while she watched Sophie play in the small garden in the back. The girl had adapted surprisingly well to the move to Paris, especially after she started attending an international school where she made friends of various nationalities. Mama! Sophie shouted from the garden, mixing Portuguese, Spanish, and the French she was quickly learning. Can you plant these flowers here? Of course, my princess, Rachel replied in French, smiling at how her daughter had embraced the new life. But be careful not to get your dress dirty before the ceremony. Today was a special day. After a divorce that had been surprisingly civilized, Victor had chosen cooperation instead of war. Rachel was finally ready to close one chapter and open a completely new one in her life. The divorce had been settled exactly as she had foreseen. Confronted with the evidence of Michelle's irregularities and the threat of public scandal, Victor had chosen to resolve everything discreetly. Rachel received half of the couple's assets, a generous amount of alimony, and shared custody of Sophie, although the girl spent most of her time with her mother in Paris. Michelle had disappeared from their lives as quickly as she had appeared. The last news Rachel had of her was that she was working in London at a much smaller firm, her reputation in the Spanish market definitively ruined. Victor, for his part, had spent the last few months trying to rebuild his life and his company. He had sought out Rachel several times, trying to apologize, trying to explain, trying to win back what he had lost. But Rachel had been clear. Some betrayals cut too deep to allow for healing. The sound of the doorbell brought her back to the present. Through the intercom, she heard the familiar and warm voice of Clive. Has my carriage arrived, princess? He asked in a playful tone. Rachel smiled, feeling that sense of peace and contentment that had become constant in her life in recent months. Coming down, Prince Clive had moved to Paris 3 months after her. He had sold his share in the company to Victor, and decided to start his own consultancy specializing in ethical and sustainable businesses. His decision to leave Madrid had been both professional and personal. He could no longer work with Victor after everything that had happened, and he had discovered that he couldn't live away from Rachel. The relationship between them had blossomed naturally without haste, without drama, built on a solid foundation of friendship, mutual respect, and shared values. Clive had courted her like a Victorian lady. Flowers, elegant dinners, long conversations about art and literature, romantic walks through the Luxembourg Gardens. When he finally kissed her 3 months after arriving in Paris, Rachel had felt something she had never experienced before. Not the ardent and often tumultuous passion she had felt for Victor, but something deeper, more estimable, more real. It was love in its purest sense. Admiration, companionship, gentle desire, and the absolute certainty that this person was someone she could trust with her life and her daughter's life. Mammon. Sophie ran into the house when she saw Clive come up the stairs. "Clive, you brought my surprise." Clive smiled, crouching down to the girl's level. At 40, he had discovered that being an adoptive father was one of the most rewarding experiences of his life. Sophie had accepted him immediately, perhaps because he treated her with the respect and attention she deserved, something she hadn't always received from her own father. "Of course I did," he said, pulling out a small wrapped box from his pocket. "A special bracelet for the most beautiful bridesmaid in Paris." Sophie opened the box and shouted with joy when she saw a delicate silver bracelet with small engraved hearts. "Thank you, Clive. Now we're all matching." Rachel looked at the two, her daughter radiant, and the man who had chosen not only to be her partner, but also to be a real father to Sophie, and felt her heart overflow with gratitude. "Are you ready, my love?" Clive asked, approaching her and gently kissing her forehead. Rachel wore a simple but elegant cream silk dress with a delicate tiara of natural flowers in her hair. It was not the traditional wedding dress. They had decided on a small and intimate ceremony, just the two of them, Sophie and a few close friends. "More than ready," she replied, taking the bouquet of white and pink pays that he had brought. The ceremony would be in the small chapel of Saint Marie in Montmartre, followed by a lunch in the garden of a charming restaurant that Clive had discovered. They had invited only 10 people. Some friends Rachel had made in Paris, Clive's family, and surprisingly Victor. The decision to invite Victor had been difficult, but both Rachel and Clive felt it was important, not out of nostalgia or dramatic forgiveness, but because Sophie deserved to have her father present at such an important moment, and because all of them needed to definitively close the previous chapter of their lives. Victor had accepted the invitation with a mixture of melancholy and genuine happiness for her. In recent months, he had made a difficult journey of self-discovery, working with a therapist to understand how he had become the man who betrayed the woman he loved. An hour later, in the small chapel, bathed in the golden light of the Parisian morning, Rachel and Clive exchanged simple but profound vows. There was no drama, no tears of regret or desperate passion, only a deep sense of being exactly where they were supposed to be with exactly the right person. "I promise to love you not only on the easy days, but especially on the difficult ones," Clive said, holding her hands and looking directly into her eyes. "I promise to be your true companion, your most loyal friend, and the man you deserve." "I promise to trust you completely," Rachel replied, her voice clear and sure. "I promise to build a life with you based on honesty, respect, and true love. And I promise never again to lose myself in our relationship. I will always remain myself, the strong woman you chose to love." When they kissed to seal the vows, Sophie applauded enthusiastically, and the few guests present smiled with tears in their eyes. Victor, sitting discreetly at the back of the chapel, observed the scene with complex emotions. There was pain, yes, the pain of seeing the woman he had loved find with another man, the happiness he never knew how to give her. But there was also a strange peace, a feeling that perhaps finally everyone was where they were supposed to be. After the ceremony, during lunch in the fragrant garden of the restaurant, Victor approached Rachel while Clive was playing with Sophie near the fountain. "Rachel," he said softly, "you look radiant." "I feel radiant," she replied honestly. "For the first time in a long time, I feel complete." "He makes you happy." "Yes," she smiled. "But more importantly, he allows me to make myself happy. There's a difference." Victor nodded, understanding perfectly what she meant. I hope you can forgive me someday." Rachel studied him for a long moment. "Victor, I've already forgiven you. Not for what you did to me, but for what you did to us. I forgave because carrying anger would be like carrying poison, and my new life is too sweet to be contaminated by bitterness." "Thank you," he said simply. "But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting," she continued gently. "And it doesn't mean we can go back. Some bridges once burned cannot be rebuilt. We can only learn from the ashes. I understand, Victor said. And I want you to know that I'm going to be a better father to Sophie. She deserves it. She deserves it, Rachel agreed. And you deserve the opportunity to be that better father. When the sun began to set over Paris, painting the sky with golden and pink tones, Rachel found herself on the terrace of her apartment, still wearing the cream wedding dress, watching Clive and Sophie plant flowers in the small garden. She thought about the journey that had led her to that moment, the pain of betrayal, the discovery of her own strength, the courage to start over, and finally the true love she had found not only in Clive, but in herself. Her life in Madrid seemed to belong to another person, a younger and more naive version of herself, who had believed that love meant sacrificing her identity for another person. Now she knew that true love meant growing together with someone, being supported to become the best version of herself. Madam Harris, Clive called her from the garden, using her new identity with a playful smile. Do you want to help us plant the last flowers? I'm coming, Miss Harris, she replied, going down to join her new family. As they planted together the small plants that would bloom next spring, Rachel knew with absolute certainty that she'd made the right decisions. Her life had been replanted in more fertile soil with people who watered her with true love and genuine respect. And for the first time in years, when she looked to the future, she saw not only possibilities, but brilliant probabilities. A life built on solid foundations with a man who valued her. A daughter who was growing up strong and confident, and a version of herself she promised never to abandon again. The story of Rachel Mendoza had ended that night at the Gala event in Madrid. The story of Rachel Harris was just beginning under the infinite sky of Paris, planting these seeds of a future that promised to be as beautiful as she always deserved.